Sure. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ann Arbor Area Association Board of Directors meeting. It is Thursday, July 6th, 2026, and you do have the agenda. First up is to approve the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion as there any effort? So moved by Jesse, seconded by Rich. All those in favor, raise your hands. Thank you so much. What do you think? Okay, so just want to make sure we're legit here. All right, that passed unanimously. Next, we have public comment. Let's go ahead and start with in person. We welcome all members of the public who wish to address the board. The board will respectfully listen to your concerns without comment. Matters of operational concern will be referred to the CEO for follow-up considerations. Our in-person attendees, there was a sign-up sheet provided at the entry table. If you wish to make a comment and you have not signed up, could you please do so now? And when your name has been called, please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and you will have a maximum of 3 minutes. Virtual attendees, if you're there, if you're using your computer, please click the raise. Sorry, nope. TheRide is calling you apparently. Please, if you're using your computer, please click the raise hand icon on your screen, or if by phone, press number 9. You will be notified when it is your turn to speak. And just give us a moment while we have someone else in. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. The podium is up by the screen. And the first one on the agenda is Delisa Brown. Welcome.
Right here.
Yeah.
All right, good evening. My name is Delisa Brown. I am a 34-year employee of TheRide and a 22-year president of the union at TheRide. I am here today to talk to you, the board, about just the state of the morale around the workplace. The morale with our membership is very low. There's a lot of people that are leaving the company, whether on their own or whether with assistance, and that is having an effect on our new members that are in training. You know, they're afraid. They're like, did I make a mistake coming here? And with all of the people that are leaving, we're losing service. Our routes are being missed. And you know, we owe more to our passengers. Our passengers are what I'm a driver. They're what I come in here for every day, and they appreciate us. I feel like our passengers appreciate us more than our employer. You know, there's just we don't have a contract at this time, and that's hurtful to the membership. And like I said, the morale is extremely low. And our concern is the direction that the company is going in. And we're afraid that at some point we won't be able to provide service. And then what? That's what we're here for. That's our job. So I urge the board to, if you don't know about the state of things that are around there, you need to know, because ultimately you're responsible for this agency. The public is looking to you to direct the management of this agency. And I think that they need you at this point. So that's all I want to say tonight. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Yeah. Next, Timothy, are you for the second public comment? Or not?
Yeah.
Okay. And thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Timothy Burrows, and I am a problem box passenger for bus. You know, I'm a little bit younger than I am. But ridden the ride for a number of years. The last time I spoke, I was really angry. Today I'm not so angry. I tried to process a little bit more, but I'm still yet very disappointed. As the research, I'm sorry, as she just kind of backing up on what she said a moment ago, the morale. I don't think I've seen the morale around the ride so low as it is now with the drivers and in the passengers, especially with the drivers, because they're out doing work every single day. The turnover, I notice it. Drivers leaving here and there because they're just not satisfied with how they're treated. That comes out. It shows in the people that are driving the buses every day, and I hate to see it. Being someone who has been in management and know how it is to see an employee that's disgruntled because they're not treated fairly. I'm looking at all the things that are happening around the city with the outfare and different things that are going on. The city is so small, and like I said when I was here prior, the drivers are what move us around. I mean, the city of Van Arbor is only so small, but you got these huge buses that are going through the city every single day, still doing the best job that they can do, because they are excellent. The workers are excellent workers, whether you actually show them that or not.
Right.
They don't feel that they're being valued. And as I said earlier in my prior comments, we can go on social media, we can brag about how good the ride is, but the ride is only as good as their employees. They're out there. And and I'm just gonna be very honest. Some of you just need to get off of your high horse and treat these workers the way they should be treated. I mean, it's just so unfair. Okay, thank you. And I may not know all the little particulars of what's going on with the contract and all that. I don't really even need to know that, but the bottom line is FA high power. Fair. Freaking fair. Let these people know that they are valued. I've seen so many drivers that give up mid-route. Just give up. In the last couple of weeks, I've seen at least 2 or 3 drivers call in and say, hey, I can't finish. I can't do this. And they're gone. That should not happen. This should not happen. I probably about 20 seconds on, that's fine. But that's all I can say. I just saw a little smirk on someone's face a moment ago. I don't know what that smirk was for, but he knows. I mean, come on. It was. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Althea, Lori? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This was I had more than 3 minutes, but you know me. No, I'm very long-winded. But my name is Althea Gloria. I've been with TheRide for almost 12 years. I love my job. Most that know me know I'm very involved in everything, not being just a driver because I care about the community and what service that we give and provide. I call in if there's garbage can full. I call if there's a bus stop down. I call for many reasons, only because I want the look of the ride as an organization as a whole to look good. With that being said, the contract negotiations are not going as fairly as they should. We're out there on the front line. You have all local 171 union members are the reason why this place runs the way that it is. It's not the pretty drafts at millage time that we give the public. It's the drivers that are out there that gives a smile. We see them running down the street waving. They're headed to work. We stop. Thank you so much. I was gonna be late for work. We all have been late before. We're gonna stop, make that sacrifice. If it's a safe place, we're gonna do it. We're dedicated to our job. We have our mechanics, we start and stop. We have our mechanics that give us a safe vehicle to transport our public. We have the service crew. They give us a clean bus so that the public can have a clean space to ride. You have the facilities, they keep our shelters looking good, safe. Our bus stop, safe and approachable. You have, no, I'm sorry.
Information.
The information specialists who help people navigate to their destination. Then you have those of us that drive the bus, that carries all of that together, combined in one, behind a 40-foot bus.
That's right.
We give, 1 minute, we give information, we make sure people get to and from their destination safe. If you haven't been downtown Ann Arbor and seen the challenges that we have to do, and we still have to have a smile on our face, we still have to be respectful, we still have to travel safely. We have cars, bikes, nobody likes a bus. We have all these challenges, and all we're asking is for a fair contract. We deserve it. And I hope that you guys get it where you can say, hey, don't take away, give. They deserve it. Thank you.
Yes, have Dirk, Mason.
Hello, board Dirk Mayhew, Ann Arbor Credit Union family, which at one time down here, for a topic I came in last, 2 months ago to say buses should be free on election day. A couple things have happened since then. First, Mr. Gardner, thanks for that estimate. Caroline Sanders and Watts offered up half that cost right away. And there's several other groups that are enthusiastic to help pay for the free on election day. So I think as the one rainbow up here, it's surprising to me how easy it is to raise money for that. It's a very popular concept. Free, fair election. Free, fair election. All right. Last time I said I wouldn't lecture this group about the freedom riders and the civil rights movement, but something came to my attention. That was 65 years ago this year. And at age 65, the bus is free. So let me connect those dots for you. The Freedom Ride turned 65 this year. And I think we should have free, fair elections. Even though I get you a check, we can work that out over email. But I think the other side will find something permanent. And I think this board should consider paying into that fund because Freedom Ride turned 65 and free, fair elections is just too big to let it go. We'll consider that. Thanks again for the estimate. I guess we'll figure out how to get the checks. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Oliver, Kristen. Welcome.
Guys, how are you doing? So, a couple handouts for you before I get started. So we could pass these that way. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristen Howard. I live at the northeast corner of in the neighborhood at Textile and Munger in Ypsilanti Township. I also own 3 businesses in Southeast Michigan. I'm here to talk about transit. In August of 2020, the township voted with the Ann Arbor and the city of Ypsilanti to approve the RISE millage 61% in favor for a 2.38 millage tax, property tax. I pulled my own tax bill recently and realized I am paying $260 a year towards the UPS and towards the AAATA, the ride system. I don't have any of those services that they are providing. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. I want to be precise about that. Not $260 for a bus I choose not to ride, not $260 for a service I cannot access. There's no stop I can walk to. The flex ride zone I don't live in. I actually just provided you guys maps for the flex road ride. And on the second page, you'll notice there's a square that's highlighted. That zone right there is right where I live. This little box size square. I want to be clear about what makes this makes us. We are not customers. We're not a service ride. Well, I'm trying to, service area the ride is doing a favor to. We are the owners. We bought into this. We pay you guys to help take care of what we're doing. So here's my question. What if we bought? I recently met with Matt Carpenter, the CEO of TheRide. I'll give him credit. He was straightforward with me. Maybe more straightforward than he probably intended to be. He told me that expanding service into my part of the township doesn't make financial sense for the ride, and that the earliest it could get reconsidered is 2035. Yeah.
Wow.
When is the next time they redraw the service lines? 2035, that's 9 years. 2 more millage cycles. Okay, but then he told me something else. He said it's highly unlikely that our population density will increase enough by then. So even in 2035, the service probability still wouldn't be offered. I want everyone to sit on that, because I don't think 2035 is a date. I think it's a polite way of saying never. If the standard is density and we're told that our density won't change, then there's no future meeting where we can win. There's no milestone we're working towards. We're not on a waiting list. We're simply outside of the line, and we're being asked to be patient about a decision that has already been made for us. And here's what makes this intolerable. The line keeps getting moved away from us. Those boundaries have been redrawn, I believe, 3 times since 2021. Each time the covered area has gotten smaller. Not different, smaller. Our tax rate didn't shrink 3 times, just the map. The ride's own website says FlexRide East serves select areas. Ypsilanti Township, select areas of the township of 55,000 people who are all paying into this. So let me put the density argument where it belongs. Density is a reason of building on business terms down to a customer. We are not customers. We voted for this millage. We fund the authority, and you cannot take a community's tax dollars and then tell the community that it isn't dense enough to be worth serving. That's not a financial argument. That's a decision about who counts. Ypsilanti Township, we count.
Yes.
So I want to be specific about what not dense enough actually costs. Rolling Mills County Park is in Ypsilanti Township. Stony Creek Road, 439 acres with the water park. And it's not private. It's owned and operated by Washtenaw County Parks and Rec. We pay for it. That's what we get as residents at the gate, or our costs. So consider what we've built here. A family in this township pays a county park tax, that's for the water parks. They pay for the transit millage. For me, that's $260 a year. And if they don't have a car, they can't get to do either one of them. It doesn't make sense.
They did.
2 public systems funded by the same households that don't connect. And the park is inside of our town borders. Wyer's Orchard is out there too. Both of them hire seasonally. There are kids in this township who could work at those jobs, have no way to get to them. 30 more seconds, I promise. And that's the flaw in this, that's the flaw in the density argument. Density counts where people sleep. It doesn't count where people need to go. Rolling Hills and Wyers pulls thousands of trips into that corner of the township every summer and fall. The demand is sitting right there. Nobody's counting it because the only thing that's being counted are rooftops. If we tell them there aren't enough houses out, if we tell them there aren't enough houses out there, they'll say the map is fine. If we tell them if you're not counting the trips, the map is wrong on your own terms. Now, look at Pittsfield Township. This past January 1st, they ended the AAATA's Flex Ride system in their contract, and they contracted with People's Express instead. They kept the fixed route and the paratransport. That wasn't a walkout. They just replaced pieces that weren't working for them. Their deputy supervisor said the reason primarily roughly 10,000 people in Pittsfield Township residents lived outside of the Flex Ride zone, which is where I live on that map, outside of the Flex Ride zone. The new service covers the entire township with the People's Choice, the entire township, 7 to 7 on weekdays, $2 a ride, seniors ride for free. So here's the part that should sting. Pittsfield Township isn't even in the millage district. They were a contract customer with less standing than we had. And they got their whole township covered by one program. Again, I pay $260 a year to be told it'll never be dense enough. So my ask today is modest. and it's a first step, not a demand, understand this. Direct staff to do what Pittsfield Township did, overlay the FlexRide East boundary on our population and report back to this board within 60 to 90 days, letting us know, of three things. One, how many Ypsilanti Township residents live outside of the service areas we're paying for? Two, how that boundary has moved since 2021. Three, what we pay and what we receive for it. Four, what sits outside that boundary? Rolling hills, wires, the employers, the schools, the clinics. Count the trips, not the rooftops. It's not a decision, it's not a number, and we've never had it. Please give us access. I'm not asking you to be unreasonable with the ride. I'm just asking you to stop waiting for a date that isn't coming.
Give them a bus they deserve.
That we can.
And then let them drive.
Good evening, board. My name is Dave Casper. People know me as Ask Me Dave. I'm an industrial mechanic, a water plant operator, and the president of Ask Me Local 369. I represent over 300 frontline municipal workers in the city of Ann Arbor. The other workers who keep the city running. I'm here tonight for one reason. To send a message of absolute unwavering solidarity with our brothers and sisters in local 171. In Ann Arbor, we talk a lot about community values, but a community is only as strong as the working class people who sustain it. While my members are out fixing water mains and plowing streets, the dedicated bus drivers, mechanics, and transit professionals at the Ann Arbor Transit Authority ensure the city actually moves. They do the heavy lifting, safely transporting our families, our students, and our workforce every single day.
Yes.
Right now, these transit workers are fighting for a fair contract.
Fair.
So let me be absolutely clear. A budget is a moral document and a reflection of your priorities. You cannot expect to retain the essential frontline professionals who make this transit system function while refusing to offer wages that match the crushing local cost of living. Or cost of living, excuse me.
Right.
The labor movement in Ann Arbor is no longer operating in silos. When one of us is at the table, we are all at the table.
Here we are.
Ask Me Local 369 is watching. Community is watching. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the transit workers. It is time to invest in the people who invest so much of their lives into this transit authority. Stop the excuses,
Stop.
pay them the wages they have
Pay
paid,
us.
and give them the fair contract they deserve.
Contract.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fair contract.
First, we're gonna go move next in the virtual attendees, but I know other folks have locked in behind. If you'd like to make public comment, the board is here to sign up with. Does anybody want to sign up?
Yeah.
So again,
Anybody else? That's one, okay. Since we have this sign up, let's go ahead, is it Marisha?
Marisha.
Okay, apologies, so.
Thank you. Good evening, board. My name is Marisha Thornton. I am Ypsilanti Township trustee. And hearing from your employees tonight
It's really disheartening. Because we pay you guys a lot of money to treat your employees fair. So to hear this, knowing that they are on the front lines every single day. There has been murders that they have had to witness. I mean, heinous crime. And they are fighting for a fair contract? That doesn't make sense. I didn't think I was coming here to hear that. I literally thought we were coming here to talk about 2 miles. But we're talking about employees who can't even get paid fairly.
That's right.
With people who sit on the board and get paid.
Yes,
Right.
Lord, yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Speak about it.
Someone online? We have Richard Staler Schultz and, sir, you are unmuted. Welcome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Richard Stoller Schulk. I've been a resident of Washtenaw County for 28 years. I'm a retired EMU professor and a proud union member of the AAUP, American Association of University Professors, as well as WBRA, the Washtenaw Bus Rider Advocates. I greatly appreciate the service that the ride's workers provide, and I was really distressed to hear just now about the low morale and slow progress of contract negotiations. I would like to urge the AATA board to come to agreement with your workers on a fair contract for the union so that everyone can continue to have the safe, reliable, accessible public transportation that is so vital to our community. I know a lot of hardworking people who regularly depend on this important service. My wife's son has to take the bus to get to his varying work shifts, putting food on our grocery shelves, and he would not be able to afford any alternative form of transportation. I volunteer with several immigrant rights organizations, and I have friends in the immigrant community and their families who need affordable public transportation to get to work, to school, to doctor appointments, and other essential activities. For both bus riders and AATA workers, Washtenaw County is one of the most expensive areas in Michigan, where a single adult needs to earn $25.30 an hour to afford basic needs, according to the MIT Living Wage Institute. We all benefit if the people staffing our bus company are adequately compensated and respected so that we can all live, work, and move around together as a community. Thank you.
We do not. So thank you so much. That will close our public comment. Next, we're moving on to general announcements. Are there any general announcements from anyone at the table? Seeing none, we will move on to consent agenda. So we will do the consent agenda into record. Moved by Mike, seconded by Simi. All those, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hands. Is Julie leaving? She will not. Okay. Should ask who's in the room. So
Yeah,
that's-
We can't hear you back here.
Is it possible to have them?
Mic?
Or a mic?
We don't have a mic, unfortunately. Okay, so can we use our outdoor voices?
Yeah.
Can I have her turn around so she faces this way? We can-
Right now, I'm having a discussion with Deb to figure out what's happening with, the vote right now.
That's helpful.
Okay. Julie, did you want to vote to accept the agenda? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, sure, so now.
I thought I raised my hand on my way out.
I apologize, I didn't know allergies, sorry. No worries. Next, we will move on to emergent items. That is our closed session pursuant to 8C of the OMA. We need to take a roll call vote to go in closed session pursuant to 8C of the Open Meetings Act. This closed session is for strategy connected with the negotiation of collective bargaining agreement. We're now going to vote yes or no to go into closed session. Mr. McElhamay,
Yes.
Mr. Singular,
Yes.
Mr. Rich Chang.
Yep.
Ms. Julie Graham.
Yes.
Mr. Justin Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Susan Pelley.
Yes.
Ms. Brittany Ramaswamy.
Yes.
Ms. Georgia Valentine.
Yes.
And myself, Kathleen Rosette, is also a yes. We will head into the room next door. Thank you so much.
Yep, no.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, and I'm going to vote to close session and yes or no reason. Mr. Mike Allen.
Yes.
Mr. Sinbar.
Yes.
Mr. Rich Chan. Yes. Ms. Julie Grant. Yes. Mr. Justin Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Susan Howard.
Yes.
Ms. Virginia Ramos.
Yes.
Ms. Georgia Valentine.
Yes.
And I myself, Kathleen Rosette, who is also a yes. It is now 19. Nice. And back into our agenda, we only have about an hour left, we may have to count. Next on the agenda is an ownership linkage task force report from Rich.
Actually, so I'd like to go back my time and so I only have a big update, and we want to go through the task force or committee. What I could do is I can give an update about a proposed plan for that. Then we can just further at a future report. So I don't think it's very time.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Ownership linkage task force basis committee is a pretty large discussion. I did include in your packet what it might look like. My biggest concern is, putting it into policy. We already have an ownership linkage task force. It's just having a written policy would be super helpful to make sure that it makes it through the future. There are benefits to having policy, to having the board design what the products would be of that task force rather than how it's operating now. Rich has been doing a great job, but I'm sure a little direction from the board might be helpful. And I know that I've heard things like, I don't know what to do as an individual. How do I do ownership linkage? I'd like to hear about the ownership linkage task force, but suss out our stakeholders that are beyond our legal owners. If the work started on moral ownership, that's not something all of us can do together in a board meeting. So anyway, that is why I brought this whole topic up in the first place. Susan Radcon did respond to my query, to make sure that, just to see what her thoughts were, and she sent an email. It has been, I sent it out to all of you, and there is actually a physical copy at your desk with her thoughts on, what it may or may not mean for the board to consider such a thing. Since Rich is the current task force leader, I'd really like to hear your thoughts and then open it up to the rest of the board.
Yeah, so what Sue Radwan provided actually aligns very closely with what I had in mind. Mine was a bit more probably operational about how I want to, and she said like, well, here's the tactical reasons why. Because what I was going to suggest, and I apologize for not making the last board meeting, I had to travel, I couldn't get out of that. But if I had made that meeting, what I was gonna propose was actually the task force, committee, whatever it is, it's definitely more a strategic body of a size to be determined and could actually be flexible as needed, but it would actually meet twice a year officially. And those 2 times a year, I was going to suggest would be December and May. Because what it would do is basically in December, set the plan for the following year of like, here is how we as a board or an organization are going to participate and gather information from our various legal owners. Our various owners, whether it's legal or moral. And then the May timeframe reviewing, okay, we are now going to review our strategic approach. Is it working? We need to modify it. And if so, then they modify for that June through December, or else just keep things as it go. In this time since the last board meeting, I have chatted with a few board members, including staff, such as Matt and Jeff, because Matt Jeff and I already had a meeting set to talk about, the next group that we want to target, which is our moral owners and some approaches and, some tactics around that. And to combine that with discussions I had with other board members, I think what we want to do, which is why I like the idea behind having this be, the way that the policy draft that Susan gave us, right, is that some of the concerns that the board members have is that they don't want the ownership linkage group to be the ones that feel they're responsible for being the ones doing all of it. So that's part of some of the aspects of the strategic sessions is to determine the what, the especially the how, but the why, right? So the why and the why are the two key pieces, and then who does the work, that is also then determined. And it could be if something individual board members have to do something, then, or it's a combination of board members and staff, or something we just say like, CEO, here's what we're the information or that we're looking for. You figure out how to have your team get that information for us, right? So that's things such as, in particular, the values. What do we consider success? What is like the values of the owners? What is important to the agency to achieve the ends and the outcomes? And to go back to the discussion I had with Matt and Jeff, is a lot of this we can actually probably get out of two surveys that the organization already goes through. One, of course, is the onboard, I think, or survey. Yep. And the other is actually the phone survey. Because I already start, I'm like, hey, we should do things like go to churches and go to areas that people congregate, interface with nonprofits, and I was like, that's great, but there's also a way to get what you're looking for, but actually just use like utilizing Hue, in particular with the phone survey and also the onboard surveys. And then one thing that we decided for sure is that we as a board, in conjunction with this strategic committee that deals with ownership linkage, is we basically come up with what we're looking for. Say, Hugh, you're the expert at this. You're the expert at crafting questions to get the information, figure out how you want to do it. Even if it's just like, choose from column A or choose from column B as your preference, and let him figure that out and ask the questions, run the survey, get the results back to us, and then make our decision there, which will help us drive this original policy. So I think to kind of summarize what I'm getting at is, well, there's one other piece I want to talk about. We, as we know, have legal owners and we have moral owners. And in the end, the moral owners, I think, is probably the most critical for us in regards to feedback. At least this is my right. This is definitely open for discussion. But another board member and I talked about this, and we both were like, hey, you know what? I think moral owners in the end are probably the folks that we as a board might want to consider focusing most of our time. Because the legal owners, one, it took us over a year to kind of get that input from them because of scheduling all that kind of stuff. And in the end, as we kind of expected, a lot of times that discussion ends up steering more toward operational. And so it might be that the legal owners, we can obtain their values through different ways. Some suggestions that were given to me is one, use AI to analyze their first city council minutes. And then anything that has to do with transportation, just pull out, this is a summary that way. Their master plans also gives us a lot of insight as to where their values as an entity is. And then we can just have staff, including some of our board members that attend these meetings, but just create that interface, the interactions, the PR aspect of dealing with the legal owners. And then we as a board just primarily focus on how do we get the values and information we're looking for from the moral one, because that's a lot bigger pool of people or entities that we are trying to gather. So that's two things, I guess, we don't have to decide today. I know we're tight on time, but is one, do we want to concentrate as a board for now, predominantly on the moral owners? And then two is, does this ownership linkage task force just basically twice a year focus on strategy, and then we just give it to others, such as Hugh, to figure out how we get information.
No, quick question, so when, after you became develop strategies. In my mind, committees and task force are there to support the board and to advise. And so I would imagine that once you came up with a plan, you would bring it to the board for their input and their finalization. So in other words, the committee or task force would have no ruling jurisdiction over anything that you're doing. The final decision would come from the board by your recommendations.
Yeah, so that's also why I'm also a fan of the structure, because one, like you mentioned, it gives us something like. There are new folks in these seats, at least have template to guide them moving forward. So yeah, that's. Yep, it's not a directed, it's a, you have recommendations like you do from a research committee and a finance committee, or makes the decision of that.
Perfect. I just raised that only because that was an ongoing debate during our robust conversation that people felt that maybe the task force or committee would take over the job duties of the board, and that's not. Okay. So we should open up to the board real quick for questions. I don't think a decision should be made because there's a lot more to talk about, but how are you all feeling about it? Really? Did you?
Yeah, I apologize, I was the last month on this sports. But I do think we have had some recent and recurring examples of where we've had some gaps between the organization and our legal owner. So I agree that well, a lot of focus should be tomorrow. I do think that there's an important role for some more work to be done with our legal owners. And if you're right, like it should take a year to get there, but I think if we had a little more defined structure in place where we knew that there were people doing that, not that anyone else can't do the work, but where there are people whose focus is that work, that might help bridge some of those communication issues and breakdowns that we've had. So I don't want to weigh in today. I'm like 2 times a year, 4 times a year, but we can't expect like everyone to be good at all things, right? And it's okay. Well, I think for those of us who come in with certain strengths and experiences to help contribute in a way that feels, meaningful and helpful, I think would be helpful to have some folks who the legal owners know that, okay, there's this group that we can go to.
Any other thoughts or questions at this time? Oh, sorry, Mike.
Particularly keeping in mind what Sue Radwan said here. And some of the things that Rich said, it seems to me that there's really kind of 2 issues here. One, what to put in a policy. I sure agree, it should be a policy. And I think it should be broad and not go into the deep gritty. That probably Rich would prepare what he sees is the nitty gritty for us, and he could get comments on it. And I think the policy should be pretty easy to. But it shouldn't be very detailed, it shouldn't be. It seems like people do that.
So between now and next month, I think if you would allow me to, and you and I and Matt, whenever, because I started this as you group, is develop a loose policy. And then the board can decide what to call the policy. You want it to be a committee? Do you want it to be a task force? That would be totally up to you. That could be decided at their time. And then the loose.
Doesn't matter.
And then the loose policies, we can have broader conversation on them and actually wordsmith them at the next meeting if everybody's amenable. Is anybody who's against moving forward with any of this? I guess is the better answer.
No, I just wanted to, but there was one thought, that's just my thought to the governance committee as you're working on this. Having, I really appreciated what Sue Radwan wrote up. And one of the things that I think helped me was that when she talked about that the most, she says the most successful impact has occurred when ownership linkage, with ownership linkage is when the board selects a topic for strategic exploration. So there's like a certain specificity about that. I don't know, like, she, talks about also, addressing like, that the committee comes up with, an annual strategy. And so I'm like, I would like the governance committee to put some initial thought into like how to reconcile those two, like what does it mean? What do those two ideas in tandem mean to have an annual strategy, but like, to be specific about topics, and I'm also, then wondering, like, what happens when there's an emergent topic during, a meeting? So those are some of the questions that I have.
No, those are good questions. Just as I'm kind of feeding a little bit off of Jesse, we live in a world of policy governance, but the world around us doesn't. And what we think of as policy, I think it's fairly constrained, and we're not doing a lot of policy, but around us, things are happening in a messy world. It's messy. And it's not everyone on council that thinks it. It's one person here, it's one person there. It's helpful to understand that, to try to be strategic, and we meet once a year, that isn't really how this world around us operates. And something will come up that suddenly is emergent and front of mind for a lot of other people, maybe showing up on our radar. I'm not sure I quite get how we mesh the structure, the enormous structure of this with the messiness around us. I'm not sure I quite get that. And there is no one voice speaking for, say, the city of Ann Arbor. That's many voices. And how we, as all the board members, have a responsibility to be involved with policy. I'm not sure I still get how all of us are still taking or using the responsibility that's been given to us. And I'm still not quite sure how we mesh this with what, just to use this last year, things that have come up this year. I'm not sure how this would have helped us. So I'm going to keep listening. So I'm glad we're not deciding anything tonight. I'm not sure I quite get how that coincides.
Yeah, I've been giving this a lot of thought, and Rich did mention twice a year for, spearheading meetings, but I also heard you say work in between, so I don't think it's just set in stone that he's saying just two. But also, your broader question, and it's been a concern of mine as well. Each one of us had these little niches, right? You were with the DDA, you used to be on city council, and so we have different circles of people, stakeholders that we all know and talk to. Perhaps what we really need is some good education from our governance coach on how do other boards empower or to help board members strategize how they are going to individually interact with the public, with our electeds, with our stakeholders, because that still to me also is a gray area. I know that when I go out, I know what our policies are, but beyond that, I know what our values are. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm talking to people. I'm not talking about to them at a policy level. I want to know what concerns them, routes, people getting to and from work, those kinds of things. But of course, when we're talking to others, they're not going to necessarily talk that way. So we need to be savvy when we're listening and try to figure out how to pull those, what are they saying and what are the values within what they're saying, and then bring it back and forth. So perhaps if you would like, I can reach out to our governance coach and add to our long list of education items this year to actually help educate on us on what it would look like and how individual board members outside of a task force operate in policy governance. And I also have met some great people at we went to boot camp at night and Rosemaria. There are other agencies out there that are governmental. There was a city there, I can't remember their name, who was there, but they use policy governance. So there are other governmental agencies that are out there, maybe not transportation oriented, maybe we could help glean some information from them or have some crosstalk or whatever. So we have a ways to go. really believe in us, I believe in what we stand for, that we are very committed to our communities, and I just really want to see this be successful. Okay, so then we'll do that at the next, okay. And we'll come back on, so thank you everyone for your understanding. Next, we're gonna move on to policies 3.0 through 3.5. In the interest of time, I think the best way to approach this then is there anything within the responses that anybody wants to put forward or are to discuss tonight? Are you happy with the report? I think the board is doing a good job. There were some, some initial feedback, but not a lot of disputes. So is there anyone here tonight who would like to pull something out that maybe they want answered within this policy? And if not, we can move on. No? Okay, fair enough. If something comes up and you have questions, I'm available by emails. I can maybe, we can, whatever. But yeah, thank you for that. Now we're going to move on to policy language discussion. I don't know if that's needed. So then we'll move on to policy language review of 2.5.1.1. That was the one that was sent to the governance committee because of the word solely. Let me pull that policy up real quick so I can refresh everyone's memory. Thank you for your patience. So 3.5.1.1 was meeting discussion content will consist solely of issues that clearly belong to the board to decide or not monitor according to board policy. The word solely came into question and we sent back to the governance committee. We did reach out to our governance coach. We strongly recommended and gave some really good feedback on why limiting yourself or by changing the word solely to something less worthy of the word is supposed to be operating with the word with excellence, and it's a target to hit. And she feels very strongly that by reducing it slowly to something else, move the target to a lower bar. It's something that we're always aspiring to. So the governance committee had a really good discussion. Mike and Richie Mike and Richie would like to weigh in on why we decided to stay with the word solely. That would be great. Or does the board want to hear anything else?
I'll just mention, I was the one who got us into this mess, by bringing that up, and I was convinced by what TheRide was saying. That so it should be.
Well, I think the matter is put to bed unless there are any concerns. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. We're moving on to the local funding presentation, and that is Dina. Thank you, Dina. Thank you.
Yeah, I would.
It's nice to meet you.
Okay, so bear with us a little bit. That's gonna be a little quicker, and so she's gonna have to try to keep up with it. So.
Is it possible to turn off the lights?
Yes, people do that. We need to share. Make sure you're.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. Oh, is that it?
It still looks smooth.
Blame it on the camera.
We knew this for conference, so the adjustment for anything else. So this is our third of a series of 3 discussions about transit funding. So we're gonna discuss the local funding piece, and then you can go ahead to the next slide. Wow, let's just show this. Yeah, can you help me? I did it again. I forgot to change my screen.
That's a apologies for that.
Madam Chair, I do have some brief notes from Jeff about a legislative update that I
You know,
might,
let's go ahead and squeeze that in, then if the board is amenable.
of course, have time here. If I can find them. Long story short, the state passed the budget, yay, very good. They gave us, less money for local bus operating than we might have aspired to. The Michigan Association, Michigan Public Transit Association asked for 330. The governor recommended 315. The House wanted to take it down to 290. We got 310. Pretty good split the baby, kind of moment. All credit to the state association. They've done a great job. The next big thing, no movement in Washington on reauthorization. There seems to be a shooting war going on somewhere, so you're not paying much attention to bill rating. And then finally, if you hadn't noticed, there's going to be some primaries before our next board meeting, local, state, and otherwise. That's probably going to have an impact for us to consider with our legal owners going forward. What exactly the outcome will be, ask me the day after. But I think there's a lot of contested seats pretty much everywhere. So Jeff will probably give you a rundown in the August meeting. But what happens after that, we'll all decide together. That's it for legislative update.
Deb, how are we looking?
It was freezing up, sorry, but it just.
Is it still freezing?
Yeah.
Guys, Matt, do you want to do a quick CEO report?
Absolutely. I will also fill time by, if I may, the business plan, item 8.1 is completed. It is available online. I think we had a couple of copies here at one point. The document is a living document. It's never entirely finished, but we welcome input at any time. Let's get on with the budget process. We're calling it done for the moment and have put it on the website for everyone to see. It's a good strategic document, helps everyone at home follow along and understand, sort of where this agency is headed. Some of the big things we're working on. Very good.
I'm wondering, Dina, most of us have, we put the presentation on our table.
Yeah.
Could we, do it from the table and then add this to our, video or a link to this video on the agenda when we post it? Oh, never mind. Oh. Never.
And I had a quick question about the LBO. What's the current rate compared with this? For the one below?
Current rate of LBO 297.
What, yeah, we just got an updated rate that hasn't been incorporated, and I'll talk about that during the budget presentation.
Oh, did you mean the rate for the?
Yeah, the rate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, but if you're gonna cover.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
Okay, it's not.
290,
All
almost.
right.
but I'm happy to cover. Okay, so we can start, if you're done.
Yeah.
Please. All right, great. So this is the slide you've seen before, and I'm just using it as an introductory to remind us all where we've been and where we are. So, as I mentioned in the very first presentation, transit funding is complex, lots of different sources of funding and lots of different regulations and compliance aspects of it. We've covered federal funding, we've covered state funding. Other funding, we're not gonna cover as a specific topic because it is just that, the other funding sources that we, that aren't really, they're just kind of revenues that we get in other ways. But local funding is what we're gonna talk about today. And as I mentioned, this is the third of 3 series. And of course, can answer questions anytime. So the first thing I just want to mention and talk about a little bit is what is local funding. So it seems pretty straightforward at first, but like anything, it can get complicated. So I just wanted to touch base. You can talk about federal funding
2 meetings ago. But during that, we focused on. All of the federal sources, but there's another component that I didn't touch on much. Because it really comes down to just a definition about what local funding is, so I want to be clear about what we're talking about today. So the FTA considers local funding in the sense of something that is not generated in a way. That would prohibit you from maybe making your local match. So on the right hand side, I kind of illustrated here. What things are eligible to match funding for federal capital projects? So you'll hear us talk about capital projects in the vein of, we get 80% from the federal government and we get 20% from the state. I do want to mention to you though, that that's not always the case in every state. The state of Michigan has said, we're gonna do our best to match all of the capital money and transit agencies get. That's a really good benefit for transit agencies in Michigan, but it's not like that in every other state. So just so you know, that's a revenue source that they fund in the budget every year. And it's important because there are only certain sources of revenue that we can use for that 20% match on capital funding. We can't use state operating assistance, we can't use state capital funding, it has to truly be generally locally raised. For us, the state of Michigan has a separate pool of money, which they call capital project funding, and that's what we use for most of our local match. If we didn't have that, we'd have to use one of the other sources of revenue on the left. For us, for transit agencies, the way we view local funding and the way we talk about it most of the time is money that we get to fund our budget. So the local transit funding sources on the left are probably quite familiar hearing about, because those are the things that we're mostly focused on when we talk about things that aren't operating the budget. So as we move forward, we're going to be focusing on a discussion about the points on the left, but I just did want to point out that other nuance with what sometimes local funding means. So moving forward, as I mentioned before, our local funding comes from a couple different places. It's locally derived, means we get it here locally, like from the transit area or a transit area adjacent. Some funding that goes to us that we've talked about before under the state side is revenues that are based elsewhere. I will touch on these just slightly at the end of this presentation in a recap way, because they do go into our operating budget. So it's important to kind of just recap and show you kind of a transition on how we look at that. On the left-hand side, you can see the millages, the fare revenues, the local agreements. These are the things that we generate locally. And as you can see here, 70% of the operating revenue is locally derived. So this is the vast majority of what we rely on for operations. So let's talk about millages. We have two kinds of millages that fund the ride. We don't talk about this very often because the statutory or charter millages that are kind of displayed here on the left, and the fine print might be hard to read here, but it is in your packet as to what those millages are. But those are millages that are ingrained in city charters. So we don't talk about those often because they're not something that we actually have to try to get they're not something we have to try to re-get over and over and over. They're just in these charters. It's funding for transit and we automatically get that through the charters. The millages we talk about the most are the ones on the right, which is the AAATA millage. That is the one that can only be up to 5 years. So we have to go out and get renewals, and if we don't get it renewed or additional funding from the millage, we would have a serious hole in our budget. How big a hole? That's this.
No, you were mid-sentence, go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna add, are the statutory millages are subject to heavy reduction. Is there any mechanism for a heavy override?
I don't know about that, and if there were, I think that would have to be by the city itself.
Like it would have to be a charter.
That's
Yes.
my understanding is it would have to go back to the municipality to seek the
Like a remote.
heavily override.
And I guess maybe we'll curve, like, or is it a curve on the Headley, like the Headley reduction, like? Does it level out at a certain point, or does it just get to zero eventually?
I don't think it levels out. It just continues to be adjusted over time.
Does everyone understand Headley?
No.
That's a complicated question. What is the Headley, or how does that work? Or,
Give us a quick.
yes,
quick-
so the Headley Amendment is a state law that says that. Essentially, the gist of it is, when you set a millage, you're setting that based on the amount of money you expect to receive from the community. As we all know, inflation happens over time, so the Headley Amendment was put in place to try to mitigate. People, in this case us, from getting more revenue than we said we were gonna get. Over time because of inflation. We still do get more, but the Headley Amendment is adjusted every single year. And they tell us and any other municipality that has a millage, they tell us what the Headley reduction is. And it's an inflationary adjustment essentially to try to keep the millage revenue from getting way larger than what you told the community you were going to receive when you set your millage.
So it's basically rate of inflation or below.
Yes,
They, to keep you at the same dollar amount, they automatically reduce your tax rate.
yes.
Yeah.
Except we did have a period during it was a pandemic when inflation was. So we had actually a rare one where it went up, but it's rate of
Yes.
inflation or below.
Yeah, so, yes,
So I guess it's gotta be a curve at some point, because there's gotta be like a dollar, it could never reach zero, but if
right, yes,
given enough time, it could functionally be zero if inflation were to get to a point where the original dollar amount was insignificant in whatever modern like dollar value at that time. That's okay.
theoretically.
And so when you renew, that's why it gets back up,
Yeah.
the 2.38,
That's a good,
for example.
The language we use in the balance is very specific, so renew and restore.
Right.
Because we approved the 2.38 mil. It will have been Headley down to probably like 2.3 by now, somewhere in the neighborhood. I think if we strictly renew it, we're renewing at the rate we have that day. If
I'm
we-
not certain about that, but
I
I
think we have to
think
restore
we
it.
have to do a restore.
Yeah, but it creates some complications. It's all part of the taxpayer revolt of the 1970s. So,
I really think the way to try to understand it is if we could had a few examples. And maybe if you have time. Or your staff would have time to just put us a few very simple examples with different assumptions regarding inflation.
Yeah, that wouldn't be hard, because we recalculate it every year and we can show you how.
And just one note. It gets uncapped if the property is sold, so to further complicate it, assuming nobody touches the property, it may keep getting lower taxes. But if somebody sells the property,
Right.
it's the new adjustment.
That's.
But that is a really.
Isn't that prop two, not Headley? Or prop A? I can't remember which.
Yeah, one of the other, yes, yeah.
There's like these two laws that work in tandem to restrict village funding.
And making it still more complicated is taxable value versus what's the other value?
Assessed value.
And so we're always in that confused space. Property keeps getting more valuable, but we can only tax it at the lower line. So your point's well taken, anyway.
Any more questions or discussion about that before I keep going? So I was just gonna say how big a hole, or how big of a difference it would be. And here at the bottom, I would see that 40%, or roughly 40% of our property taxes are generated through the statutes for the villages. And approximately
60% of the property taxes we collect rely on the AAATA millage, so that millage, as we all know, I think, but I'm happy to expressly say it is absolutely significant and critical to our operations going forward. So the next thing I wanted to kind of touch on with the relationship to millage is how it goes from a millage. Generally, this is super high level. There's a lot of nuances we already started to explore here today. But there is a broad brush I can talk about when something goes from a millage to a revenue. And basically the net to us from the millages that the millage that we levy, which is the 2.38, is about 95%. Because we have, not only are we restricted by Headley and some of those other things, once it gets through that hurdle, if you will, then the revenue that comes to whatever municipality collects the revenue, or the property tax revenue, then has kind of, I'll call it a bite at the apple, where they have ways that they collect money from that. And out of that, we get about 95%. So there's a few things listed here. These are the big ones. You can see the percentages that are here are representative of about the percentage that we lose. And they total, like I said, 5%. The risk about this is, so this is villages who are important, huge percentage of our revenue. A good story because we're heavily supported by our communities. However, there are some risks, and those are things that are starting to kind of become a little more common. And so it's something that we're thinking about for longer term projections, and we'll talk about that as we talk about projections throughout the budget cycle. But I did want to mention that captures, tips, and fees, they've always been there. But we've seen a little bit of growth in that, and we expect to see more based on some of the new developments and things that are happening that are exercising these options more often. And when that happens, it's gonna affect those percentages, those captures, the brownfield inflection. We know that the Ann Arbor DBA has made changes to their capture, to their capture area. We know that's going to affect us. We have some initial assumptions, but we're not gonna be seeing those things probably right away. This is over a period of time. So the good thing is, you know, that we provide everything in the context of not only this year or next year, but a multi-year. And so we will be working closely with our partners to try to build those things into the projections as we know more.
Just to finish it. The TIFs and the brownfields are captured, there's a but for reality. So we wouldn't be receiving taxes if they weren't doing their job to incentivize new projects. So it's not that we're losing money, it's that if they do their job right, a new project comes online, probably which a small portion is to. But it's a but for arrangement. For the DDA's expansion, we're not gonna lose tax dollars in that new area. What we hope happens is they incentivize new property investment. And those new taxes may have a small portion that would have otherwise gotten to the right.
Yeah.
So if the offset is new revenues are coming to us.
True, it's harder for us to factor that into our projections. So that is one of the things we will be talking about when we're working with our partners. And so, yes, potentially it could be more, and we'll build in whatever we can reasonably assume or expect.
For the rest of you going too much in the weeds, but are revenues affected by a payment in lieu of taxes agreement? Like, could there be couldn't there be a capture? And then the city also does a pilot, unless there is no more tax revenue. So it's not always that way.
Yeah, those are rare, we're here from a council member, those are rare. And they typically are very low income projects, which
are getting more and more rare because these are now mixed income projects that are being encouraged. So, but yes, that is another possibility.
So the last thing I want to mention about this before we move to the next slide and move on to a different topic. Is a different revenue topic, is that we're gonna be doing some more research into how these work. And kind of putting together some additional information for us to try to improve our projections over time. And we'll probably be sharing that information with you and to the extent that we have it during discussions, the future discussions about property tax millages and so on. So the other category we mentioned that's locally derived from that slide, a couple slides ago, are fair revenues. Fair revenues can take many forms. We typically think about fair revenues in the traditional sense of collecting fares. So on the right, we refer to that mostly as cash fares. And I thought this would be helpful to kind of share with you just how many different types of fares that we have. This is not an all-inclusive list. There could still be, there's like half fares and other types of fares. The general categories, these are what we consider to be cash fares. These are fares that they're based on fares that we set, that the board sets and approves or doesn't approve. We haven't had any increases in fare revenues and in fares or change in fares in a long time. As you all know, we're doing a fare study. We're looking at all the different things that the board has mentioned to us that are topics related to fares. So there will be a lot more coming about fares and what those fares look like or could look like, or how we could collect them. Those will all be discussed in future discussions about the fare study. But I definitely wanted to show you here how many different types of fares generally we collect on the right. And on the left, we have partner fares. So partner fares can also take different approaches. There are different kinds. Some of them are they're all based on, in some way or another, the fares that we set. But they look different depending on the agreements that we have. So agreements with them may not look the same as the DDA Go Pass. We know that those are very different. Same thing with all the other ones listed there. We have agreements with all of these partners about that essentially are based on fares that we set. They're how we collect them and what the fees are, they're all slightly different based on the fare. And I'm not going to get into all of them. It's a smaller percent of our revenue as a whole, but it's an important part of our revenue because it does add up quickly, and changing of fares or anything that we would do with a fare would impact not only the cash fares that we collect, but the partner fares that we see and collect. In addition to fare revenues. Sorry, is there a question? We have local agreements and contracts. These are also very different. But they comprise roughly 4% of the revenue. Posted contracts are called what we call purchase of service agreements. These are agreements to purchase services outside from the service area. Think additional services that other generally adjacent areas would like to have from the ride. But because they're not in the service area directly, there's no mechanism for them to pay for the service without entering into what we call a purchase of service agreement. So again, they're not contributing to the village the same way that the Ann Arbor and Ipsy Township are. So we have separate agreements with each of them. They're long-standing agreements, all of these here, and they are were originally and are still based on the amount of service that those areas receive from the ride. On the right, a list of pass-through contracts, and I think here the most important thing to note is this is sort of a service in a way that the state relies on transit agencies of urbanized areas to help provide funding from the state level, generally speaking,
through, as a pass-through. And technically a subrecipient. So what's interesting about pass-through agreements is we pass through the funds, so you'll see in the budget, for instance, we'll have a revenue and an expense because we're passing them through. And then there's a credit for the fares that they're collecting, so we, as an organization, are made whole, it's like a net zero financial relationship. But we do have oversight responsibility for our pass-through contracts when it comes to the FTA.
Do we take a fee for doing this the way we just looked at the earlier slide, it was a cost, say the city of Ann Arbor assesses a fee to collect their taxes for us. Do we assess a fee on those two pass-throughs?
That's a great question, and we don't. There is a fee that comes through, some of the funding sources through the RTA. Because we're technically under the umbrella of the RTA. There's a small amount of money that they get for money that federally passes through. But for the state, there's really no, we started to talk about this, but it's not something that we've implemented or come to a conclusion about how to handle.
And one last question, which is service for our disabled community. Do we expand that by being involved in these arrangements that the service area for people who have transit needs that we provide for, again, for disabled community? Does it expand by having these arrangements?
So not the pass-through agreements, well, if we have direct service, then yes. We would build that into the cost, the overall cost. On the posted contracts, yeah, same thing. So anything that we provide fixed drop service for, we're required to provide ADA service. So that's a federal requirement. So yeah, we would. Thank you.
Can I throw another log on the fire?
Sure.
Another example of the complications and interconnections, so the pass-through contracts. We haven't always had the responsibility of overseeing that. It was downloaded on us when John Metzinger was here, here with John. So on one hand, this is a nice thing we do to help our neighbors. We are facilitating the expansion of public transit by serving as part of the plumbing by which this money moves from the feds to the state out to these local communities. We could say no, but we chose to be a good neighbor and do this. We don't charge an administrative fee for doing that. The flip side of it is that we are now responsible for the Wave and People's Express and their compliance with federal law. That rolled down onto us too. So we got dinged in our last triennial, I think, because JFS didn't file some paperwork correctly because they were one of these pass-throughs and they didn't do it. That got found. We're the ones who got dinged for it. Because we're the ones who are supposed to enforce on these subrecipients the expectations that they're complying. So there is a cost to us for being a good neighbor. It doesn't really cost us a whole lot here. In this case, it didn't cost us anything. But if that became a routine problem, it would be our federal funding that would be at risk. And we would have to crack down on our subrecipients or cut them loose. So these things are connected in ways that are surprising sometimes.
I just want to say, I know there's more to present, but this is really, really informative and very easy to follow. Like it really breaks down a very complicated. We just think, even hearing this, people because they before you join this board, it's just like it's a bus, right? You don't think about all that's behind it that funds it, and so this is really, really good information to start processing. So thank you for breaking it down for people like me.
Welcome. The only thing I would add to what Matt says about the pass-throughs and some, we call them subrecipients because they're subrecipients is, you're absolutely right. We
we have a responsibility for oversight and we have changed the way that we're administering oversight. Just in the past year and a half, because. It wasn't an area that the FTA was as focused on in terms of the triennial review, if you might remember, is very broad, very vast, there's. So many sections, so many things, and it wasn't an area that they've really focused on, and I think. When we went through the last review, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about what our responsibilities are. And ultimately what their responsibilities are. And I think that was the challenge is holding those agencies accountable for the revenue that they're getting. So it was an interesting process, but we did learn a lot and like we're better for it. But it is, at the end of the day, it's not a core part of what we do every day, but we view it as an important part of being a partner in the community. So, when we look back at the board's ends and things like that, it does fit into that, to those ends in terms of, providing service to the region and to the area, but there is a cost to it, as Matt said, and it's mostly staff time, but it takes us away from other things at times, so. All right, so moving on to the next kind of topic. We talked about state operating assistance. A lot about state revenue. We talked a lot about at the last presentation, so I'm not gonna belabor the point here. But I did think it was important to kind of talk about a couple of points that we didn't get into much because they're really something that we talk about all the time. And so I thought giving a little education in this area and a level of detail that wasn't covered in the last discussion might be helpful. So to recap, you might remember on the left, something that looked like that. It was a full page, but I just took out the relevant point here. Interesting point. NDOT does provide local bus operating assistance, and we talked about that. We even had information at the bottom here that said that the state or the MDOT can provide up to 50% of eligible urbanized and non-urban areas, which is what we are, over 100,000 population. But you can see here on the right that they really never have. So just so that you're all aware, there is a cap. That cap is much higher than it's ever been. So that's an opportunity. It's not something you would ever expect to happen because it never has. But when we're at the state level, looking for funding and things like that, we just want you to be aware that that is something that could be. The historical numbers here are kind of interesting. And this particular chart was taken from the budget discussions last year. So it's a little dated, but I still thought it was relevant to kind of point out where we've been and where we could be if, there was an opportunity for that funding. Clearly, we are in this range here. The good news that came from last year was the 5 years of stable funding of about 272 million. So we ended up right in here. And that's where it still stands. And I will talk a little bit more about that later in the budget presentation, but they did throw a little more money at it this year in the budget, and we'll talk, like I said, we'll talk about that later. But it's still really hovering around this 30%, but you can see before it was much higher. So we look at this as a very stable source of funding, but those small changes can make a big difference to our budget. So it's something that I like to remind you about what the options are.
Yeah, I have one question.
Sure.
There's the 50% cap, which is a dream, I guess. Is there any floor?
I don't. Yes, there is, but I can't remember the percentage right now. I want to say it's around 12 or 13%.
Way lower than.
Way low, yes.
And this is legally what MDOT can do. That's not the same thing as how much has the legislature decided to give to MDOT in order to fund this. The MDOT has to pay all the transit agencies around the entire state from the same pot of money. So the legislature gives them a pot, they figure out how far it will go and spread across everybody. That's where you get the 30% that we sometimes talk.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
There you go.
Coming up.
So in the next
Foreshadow.
slide. So in the next slide, this, again, we didn't talk about this last time. How does it come to us? How do we get it? How does it work? So ultimately, long story short, budget every year sets the amount of money that will go to transit for LBO funding. We talked about the detail of how that happens before, so I'm not gonna talk about it here. But over on the left, you can see just a very high level equation. I've talked about this, there's another slide coming up in the budget presentation that kind of gets to this. And so you'll hear it over and over, but it's basically the amount of LVO dollars allowed or allotted divided by all the transit agency expenses in the state, whatever those may be in dollars. And that comes out to a percentage, and that results in our LVO percentage. So the important thing here is not only is the budget important, but inflation, how much are other people expanding? So we're all kind of working together with one pot of funding. So again, that percentage can vary and does vary. Even if the budget stays the same, our percentage will vary based on all the expenses of other transit agencies in the state. Next slide. So I want to summarize this presentation. And thank everyone, by the way, for this great discussion, because there's been a lot of good discussion here and affords more. But the summary is that we have about 71% of revenue that's locally derived. And that's really important in a lot of ways other than funding our operating budget. So just want to mention briefly, the importance of this is that it provides a stable funding source, something that we can count on, build on, and grow with. It also allows us to leverage our position to get other sources of funding. We talked about this a lot during the millage. For every dollar we get in funding or we get locally, we generate another $1.40 from other sources of funding outside of local funding. And having a stable agency and stable local funding is a very attractive. It's a very attractive thing to be able to leverage when we're going for discretionary funding. So we get that formula funding on the capital side, but we also have opportunities for discretionary funding. And if we can show how strong our community supports transit in the way that they fund it, that is a very valuable leveraging opportunity for us. The other thing is that we can leverage it in capital. So remember, a while back, we had to rely on capital funding a little bit to supplement our operating budget. But since we don't have to do that anymore, we can take that money and put it into capital investment. So this strong local funding that we have really supports that as well. And then at the end, I just want to mention how that really secures mobility and equity for our region, both from an operating standpoint and a capital standpoint. On the next slide, and the last slide I have in this presentation is about risk. So we talk about risk all the time. And one thing that is relevant to this discussion is that the local funding is the thing we have the most control over. So it's generated here, we have the option to change the millage, we have the up, down, whatever. We have options to look at fares and how we apply fares, how we charge fares. As that sphere of influence goes out, we have a little bit less influence, but it's still important for our budget. We do have influence. The work that we did with MPTA and at the state level has been significantly important. But again, we don't have direct control over that. And at the federal level, we have even less. So reauthorization and things like that happen are out of our control. So the local revenue is just really critically important because it's something we have a little more direct control over. That concludes the presentation that I have. I'm happy to answer any other questions or comments or feedback. Yeah. Great.
No, I'm just gonna go back to my comment I just made a few minutes ago, maybe just Rich, made me kind of think about. I'm sorry to sideline if that's okay, but I was just thinking about this meeting we had today, this room full of people, and the meeting we had previously at the library, full of people, and then we go into closed session. This and knowing that our operations updated, our CEO report, it's the very bottom of our agenda. Have an opportunity to tell our story of what the great things that we're doing and the deep work that you're doing that's not being heard, because we spend so much time on policy discussion, which is important. But I feel like our whole agenda needs to be flipped, because this is such great information that you're working on. I don't know, I mean, it's public, so people should be able to see this, hear it. We have this audience and we let them comment and we go into our room and then talk about policy, we lose people back 2 hours later. So I just want to say like something like this, and then hearing the budget and hearing, how our ridership is, that's all important things that I think the board member, and there's a public person to say, that should be something I think moved up to the next agenda. I just would throw it out there. I know it's not waiting for you to answer, but sorry, there. Issue.
We can certainly explore, I'm sorry, I was writing what you just said. We can certainly explore new agenda items around, I'm gonna have to write my head around. Part of that, I think the best way to move forward then is to move the merchant closed session maybe to the end, so that people do get a chance to stay. I know that our governance coach would probably have that reaction if we tried to. If we were to try to take away too many policy things, because we're policy governance board, but there are certain shades and shift. We can talk about those kinds of things at the governance committee meeting, that night when morning to talk about the next month's agendas. And then it goes through the governance committee, so we can certainly, try to figure something out.
Yeah,
It is all, does the whole board feel that way?
Oh, I just would just, please ask that question. I remember the last meeting, we went into policy discussion, it was quite neat. And I remember people in the audience just leaving at some point, because I think when people come to a meeting, they are engaged and they want to know, they're invested in the bus, the ride, sorry. And they want to know what's happening, and then I think when we're having policy discussions, that's a very forward specific topic, and I just saw people leaving. So when I saw this today, I was like, I think we're missing opportunities to inform people of what great things are happening, and
I think something can be done ad hoc, right? So if, and it's probably just for maybe the next. Because if we look and there's a whole bunch of folks in the data, like, then we were like, let's we adjust to move some of these, like this budget. Or the funding thing, I think is really important for folks to realize, like, it's not just we have a piggy bank that we just somehow money shows up. And we just pull from it as an infinite money tree too, so I think it's that informative piece, and so I don't think officially we have to change the order. But it could be just like gateway calls, and like, you know what, let's move a few of these in before we go into closed session.
Yeah, and I think what we do for the actual budget hearing that happens in August, we do move that up to the very top, so that, I guess there is a public hearing in August, but yeah, we can certainly look at ways to maybe help with some of these agenda items more clearly, and I would hope to that these committees to help, negotiate how we might want to look at our mature agendas.
Yes, Susie, if I could just ask a question or to you as well. I mean, you're a newer board member, during the orientation, would things like this be woven in, would that be helpful to you as one of our newer board members?
100%. This is like. This gave me, this one presentation gave you so much understanding and a very simple way to process it. That our packet is massive, it's like it's a binder, right?
Oh, that's the same question, I agree. So maybe, I mean, that might be something else that we could wait for governance about the orientation of the board members. And it could take place over a couple of days, it doesn't have to all be wedged into one solid meeting, because you're absorbing information. I found it's also at the board now for a few years.
Yeah. So I was gonna say it's part of our like learning process, so if the new board member comes in, we haven't got there yet, there's a way to have to give it to them, so that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that does like take place at orientation, onboarding, is that I asked Deb, I compiled a list of documents such as something similar to this, so our long range plan. And other different relevant documents, the budget from the previous year. And I have them sent to the new board members, just so they don't have to hunt and peck for it online. But I also know that, the board, the governance committee is thinking about some ways to help make these documents more easily accessible to the whole board, so that when we, because this is an education item that we had on our list of things to do. I don't know that it's gonna come back because it's been presented, but how can we have this information readily available so that if somebody has a question, they can pull it out instead of saying, what board meeting was that at, and how do I find it, and where is it on the video? Those we are exploring that, so.
Gonna do it. Gonna do it.
Ready to do it.
Yes, ma'am.
I have recently threatened, suggested to her. That perhaps we could make a video of this presentation and post it on YouTube.
Oh, that would be fun.
We have considered similar for sort of perennial questions. Tell me about local funding, federal, state, bus stops. We always get questions about why are your benches here and not there? And we have thought, both for board member orientation and for the general public, have it augmenting our YouTube channel with learn about the ride. Things where a snapshot of this presented by, in a flattering way with good lighting, our staff presenting their versions of similar presentations might be helpful. Some of the things I'm hearing tonight sort of reinforce that, yeah, that might not be a bad idea to revisit. So that's something we're going to continue to consider. One other thing I might mention, even if you change the agenda, people might still just leave.
True.
So.
True, but I mean, you had 30 people who could have saw this, right? And just say,
Maybe, yes.
if I was a public, I've gone to a lot of public meetings, and if I was an angry person and I saw the whole board just go into a room and close the door after the people were here. It doesn't come across well, just like it's like, okay, yeah, we heard you, bye, and we're gonna, like, you've seen that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's not why we had it on our agenda, it's just, I think we just have an opportunity, we have really great information, I'm sure, sorry.
I just think that the city has a citizens academy that they run where you learn about different parts of this, and I wonder if something like that could be integrated or we could. But I like the idea of videos first, but see where that could take off.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the general public in terms of information that they have or don't have. It's certainly not possible. Today is a good example to have everything in the board package. It's gonna be at the meeting. It's physically impossible, I'm sure. We set out the board package, we can. That would be very unreasonable to say that's the only thing. That wouldn't be a good thing, just to not include things like this. And we didn't have to hear about, but we could consider. Putting on our website in some fashion exactly how to organize it. Have a immediate idea, but think about having presentations that are not in the board package, be somewhere accessible on our website.
I do want to say that I think Deb, when the board meeting is done. And all of these presentations have happened, if they weren't in a packet, she adds them to that board packet, so it is. Yeah, Deb will.
Because I have occasionally looked at past meetings, like if I missed some, but I never saw that, maybe I just.
It's usually at the end of the packet and I'll try and highlight it like a red PowerPoint page, whatever, because I can't necessarily shimmy it in without scrolling.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But it's a lot to go through to get to the very bottom.
Yeah, that was my problem, my fighting.
If we're done with this conversation, I know, yes,
Just to say something on really quickly that, I guess my only concern would be if we did present this earlier while we're asking questions, we could get other questions that
would be expected to be answered during the presentation? Just a thought. That's all.
During the presentation, it's for the board, only there's 2 opportunities for public comment, so if someone were to watch something like this. There is public comment at the end of the board meeting, they were welcome to make any sort of comment that they want at that time. We just wouldn't take comments during the actual presentation or during the actual portion of the board meeting. So do you know that I had right in the budget preview, and I apologize, everyone, we're going a little long, it is now 20:47.
Okay. I'm happy to do that. I will try to make my comments maybe a little more brief. We do have another discussion coming up in August, so there are committee meetings and other things too, so lots of opportunities, but I will make sure to hit the main points and not rush too fast. Okay, so today, you have an issue brief in our packet that does discuss in some level of detail where we're at with the budget currently. There's a P&L statement in there, revenues, expenses. There are detailed descriptions of some of the most of the assumptions and where we're at with certain things. So what I'm going to do in the presentation today is do a high level overview of all things related to this year's budget and some of the highlights and talk about some of the things that are a little more complex. So we'll start with budget introduction, budget refinement. So I'm going to go forward. I'm shortening this initial section, but I just always want to touch on how important the process is and how it is aligned with the board's policies. Everything we do falls under that umbrella. We create a business plan, and that business plan guides our budgeting process. So we think of it in terms of, policy, long range plan, and then execution. And the annual budget is just a huge part of that execution opportunity. It sets the framework for not only what we spend, but what initiatives will be funded or eligible to be funded throughout the next year. And of course, then providing everything in alignment with the board's policies in multi-year context, showing cash flows. All of those things will come as part of the budget book that you'll have in August. So just wanted to make sure that you all recognize that this is just one more step. And we are at the step of what we call a budget preview. So if you want to go forward one more slide. Our budget timeline, thanks to Andy for highlighting where we're at tonight, right in the middle there. We're really right in the middle. We're in the thick of it. And it's July and hot, but we're doing it. So tonight we're doing the budget preview. And what this means for the stage of the process is that we are sharing with you assumptions that are really driving the revenues and expenses more high level, level, and there's a lot more work to be done. So the numbers that you see in your issue brief and some of the numbers that you'll see here will change. By August, we expect to have a level of refinement that will be almost done. And it will start to include initiatives or funding for initiatives. And then between August and September, both in committee meetings, at board meetings, we will provide the board with like a refinement of what you saw in August. We don't usually see a lot of big changes from August to September. We want to have no surprises. And we're hoping by the time we get through August and into September, the board has had the opportunity to ask the questions that you need to ask, seen the information that you expect to see, that we're required to provide you by policy, and that you're comfortable and get budget approval at the September meeting. It's required that we do, as I mentioned before, have approval by October 1. So if we're doing our job and communicating with each other, I think we should be well to get there. You can also see that we're doing public budget preview this month. By the end of the month, we'll have posted our budget, our draft of our budget, which will be very similar to the one you're seeing tonight. We're required to do that by August 1st by state law. It will be available to the public. It will be, someone can come to 2700 or corporate DGOC and see the budget for themselves in paper. And there will be you'll see a press release go out. So that's the type of communication that we're talking about. And then again, in August, by law, we're required to have an official public hearing. So we will do so in August. And again, all things related to try to make sure that the public has the opportunity to review and inspect our budget as we go through the process. So with that, let's just talk about the budget a little bit. Our highlights have not changed since the last time. We're presenting a balanced budget, both in this here, and we expect that budget to remain balanced through the end of this process. We are putting all of our revenues into full service levels, so no changes to service, no fare changes. And one thing we're really dealing with is a lot of cost pressures. We're going to talk about that today and also in August. So moving forward, order of magnitude, we're talking about a $76 million budget. We're, like I said, our budget is balanced, and that means it has to be, revenues have to be equal to or exceed expenses, and they do, they slightly exceed right now. This stage in the budget process, we have not yet incorporated additional initiatives. This is what we call our baseline budget, the thing that, what the revenue or the expenses, what it will cost us to operate everything that we promised the public for the full year with full staffing levels and all of those things. You can see that 75% of our budget goes directly to transportation, direct transportation. So it's not only purchase transportation, but our transportation services that we provide. Utilities and insurance arguably, you know, you could say could be considered direct, but we exclude it just to make this a really pure number. If we included that, it would be over 80%. So not way more in direct transportation than administration. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, and is consistently true, over 85% of our revenues are coming from the property taxes and the state operating assistance. That remains to be stable, which is a very good place for us. And it's driving significant revenues for our operations. Next slide. So as I just said, revenues are stable. I just wanted to give you a picture of where things have been over time. You'll see that generally speaking, revenues are pretty consistent with the types of revenues we collect. The caveat to that is, as you might remember, the green bars from 2020 to 2024. We had the pandemic relief fund revenue, no longer collecting that, was able to adjust our millage in order to make sure that we could sustain the revenues, and we had increases in service levels. But I thought this was a good way to kind of demonstrate the reliance on it and the long-term stability that we have with our revenue sources. This is our third consecutive year. It says that here without needing any federal operating assistance, and we expect that to continue with the revenues that we're seeing. So yeah, just a stable picture of revenues to support. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the assumptions. Property tax revenue assumptions, we went through this in a little just now, so I'm not going to go through too much of this, but the assumptions are important here. We are essentially estimating a 4.6% increase in the annual assessments or at annual assessed values, which are driving an increase in some of the revenues that we're seeing. It is, of course, less uncollectible accounts and so on. So year over year, we're projecting property tax revenues to be about 4% higher from one year to the next. The budgetary change is a little bit different because this year we generated a little bit more property taxes than we budgeted. So if you were looking at the numbers in the issue brief, the year over year is 4%. I think the issue brief was just a little bit higher because we budgeted a little bit lower this year, but essentially that's a good stable growth and very helpful when we're looking at our some of the cost pressures that we're going to talk about shortly. This is the slide I was alluding to a few minutes ago when I was talking about our local funding source and LBO funding and the percentages and the revenues. This chart shows the blue line over time as this from 2015 to 2027. What the revenue was that came from the CTF for transit funding. And then the line on this graph shows what the percentages were that we could use for our budget. So that's the percentage of eligible operating expenses that we would get. An interesting thing that I like to remind folks is you can see that in 2024,
the state was able to allocate money from the general fund and other sources to help beef up revenues for transit. And that's relevant because if you look, even though the revenues increased dramatically, the actual percentage that we got actually went down. So it went up in 24 and then down in 25, even though the revenues were fairly stable, but you can see that that's not exactly what you would expect. And when you get into 26, this is where the new budget passed last year and said, for the next 5 years, it was a big win for transit because we got stable funding for 5 years of 272 million. However, the percentage did not increase for what we got. And that is a factor of the inflation that not only we're seeing, but all the transit agencies are seeing. It can be inflation, it can be added services where other costs are going up in other agencies. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know that that's the denominator and that's what makes that happen. So for 2027, all the numbers that you've seen so far, assume 28%, 28.1%, because the initial MDOT planning rate, they gave us that number in the spring, and then they revise it through the summer when they know what the budget really looks like. That 28% was based on the same revenue from last year. So again, a slight decline in the percentage, even though the revenue was flat. It's just a factor of it. We know about it. We factor it into our projections. Good news is the budget was approved and that number went up. So instead of 272 million, we're gonna be getting, transit's gonna get 310. So that number, that 28.1%, we expect to go to just over 29.9393%. So it goes up to 4. You don't care about that, but that's what it is. So we will be building in the next draft for August, the new numbers that you'll see additional revenue related to this. Based on that new percentage. And we're really happy that this year we know what it is in the middle of the budget cycle, so we can make adjustments as necessary and potentially incorporate some additional initiatives to help move things along a little bit faster. So one of the, I mentioned, that's a little bit, that's really all I'm gonna say about revenue. I want to move to expense now, just some of the cost pressures. This is the same slide I showed last month, so I'm not gonna go through all the details of it. But the orange line on the right is essentially what we're budgeting for 2027. Wanted to share it and continue to remind you that, not remind you that fuel prices are up, because we know that. But in terms of how do you budget for such a thing? We use other projections that are available to us publicly, and we look at what we believe our consumption will be. And we try to set a rate that we think is reasonable based on projections that are available to us, as well as where we have seen things. So you can see that in July of 2026 and into October, there's a dotted blue line. That is our projection right now for what we expect the cost of fuel to be per gallon. And so we're basing our budget on something that we think is reasonable, but significantly higher than in 2026. So you're seeing that increase in our budget. Fortunately, some of these inflationary pressures are offset by some of the increases we've seen, both in LVO funding and property tax revenues. So we are still in good shape where that's concerned. But this is what the projection is right now, and we'll have another projection right up until probably the end of August, where we make any final tweaks we want to make. But we do look at it from a consumption and a rate perspective, so that if and when that changes, we kind of know where it is that we need to make adjustments in the future. That's fine. Another thing that you may have noticed is that purchase transportation costs are decreasing. We talked about this in the finance committee meeting, and that drove us to think about how we want to present this. So I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. The three main elements in purchase transportation costs are TheRide, TheRide, and TheRide. So there are 3 separate categories here, and you can see budget and actual budget projection and budget for 25, 26, and 27. The main point I want to show you here is
mostly on the left where you see TheRide. The taller bar on the left of each of those colors is the budget, and on the right is the actual or what we project for 2026. You can see that we have been sort of underperforming, if you will. These are all demand-based services. So we are not restricting the demand or doing anything to restrict it, it's just what the demand is. So the decrease that you're seeing is not any kind of a cut or structural change to what we're doing. It's basically just a right sizing of what the demand has been over the past few years. And kind of notching that budget down over time to kind of get it closer to what we think the reality is on the expense side. So again, not a restriction really of anything, just adjusting the budgets for what the demand has been. So to kind of summarize things, I think I do want to mention, the key changes are here, you can kind of see how they roll. On the expense side, what I want to mention here is, you know, revenues are going up, expenses are going up as well by not quite as much, which is a good story. And so we do have a balanced budget. I want to just point out here under expenses, there are several things that we're watching, and we call these some of our risk factors. At the end of the day, the material and repair parts, there's a component in there we did not talk about tonight. We are gonna talk about that in August. So if you did notice in the budget, you know, it's in your packet. There are some increases in expense there that we are looking into. We think those assumptions are solid, but we are still looking into that. We'll provide more details similar to the expense detail we shared here on some of the other things. But for the most part, we feel very confident in where we're at with most of the projections here. We'll be just making adjustments as needed. But we definitely still expect to be presenting a balanced budget from August and the next. So to summarize and show you just a glimpse at what the projections are on the next slide. Our financial outlook is stable now, and we project that it will be stable. We'll continue to update this as we make changes to the budget. You'll also see it in the budget book. It's always really important for us to share with you in the context of all these moving parts and things that we're seeing. Where do we think we're gonna go? Especially as we think about what might be happening with our next village. As I mentioned earlier, our current village goes till 2028, so we're getting closer. And so we're really thinking about what will happen in the future, but for right now, with general revenue and expense increases over time, similar to trends that we've seen, we are really close together, which is where we want to be, because we want to be spending the money, we want to be making sure the revenue we collected goes back into the community. But we also don't want to be right on that line, because then we have no flexibility to make adjustments if needed, if something changes throughout over those years. We know that the budgets we set are stable and good, but they're not 100% accurate, so we have to have a little bit of surplus there to just kind of make sure that we can weather all of the things that come at us from year to year. And then the last couple things I want to mention really are just about the capital budget. So we talk a lot about operating, but we're getting into capital. We're still in pretty heavy development of the capital budget, although we're not expecting a lot of new expenses, but what we are seeing in the budget for capital for this year, for 27, is a significant increase in expansion services. And it looks like as a percentage, state of good repair is going down, but in fact, it's actually going up year over year. It's just as a percentage, it's going down. Because the expansion of services is so great. And the main things going on in the capital budget this year is that the Y2C will be going into, or is planned to go into construction next year. That will be a significant increase in our capital budget. We are fully funded for that, so the funding is not an issue. And we also have an ITS modernization project, which when you start to see the line item detail on the capital budget, you'll recognize where it'll be under technology. But that is the plan review and replacement, or the start of a replacement, which will continue for a couple of years of our
clever, I don't know what vendor it will be, but it's of all of the monitors and communication systems and all of that. So that's reached the end of its useful life, and now we're moving into the whatever the new plan will be. So there's a study going on starting this year. Study will be completed next year, and then we'll be moving into that next year. So that's significant. Finally, the funding for capital budget, I always like to remind folks just kind of like what this looks like as a whole. We have federal, state, and other funding this year. A lot of our funding for the YTC is coming from, what we would kind of put in the other, which is a kind of congressionally directed spending or an earmark. So it's still, so we kind of note that separately. So where typically we would see federal funding as, maybe more like 70% of our budget. It's gone down a little bit because we have a different source of funding for that YTC. But nothing has actually, there's no decrease in spending on state equipment repair. It's just a factor of additional revenue coming into this mix, kind of changing the way that mix looks for next year, but it's revenue to support the projects I just talked about. And then to close out this section on the budget, just want to talk about the one thing we always mention is what are our opportunities, what are our risks. We are still executing on our long-range plan, and as I mentioned, we have strong millage. We have all fully funded reserves, we have no debt. And in addition to that, we have some risks that we're looking at. I've mentioned those, I'm just kind of summarizing them here. For the big one that I didn't talk about at all is we're still in labor negotiations, and remember, that's a big percentage of our workforce. So depending on that negotiation, when it gets completed, we may or may not have information to put into the budget before it's completed. So there may be some assumptions that have to go in there, waiting for that contract to be completed. We're just not sure when it will be completed. So if it's not done by budget, we'll have assumptions in there and then see how they pan out over the next year. And with that, just summarizing the preview highlights to close things out, nothing new here. Concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions, take comments, thoughts.
Any questions from the board at this time? Or do you? I guess.
In the packet, I saw that you're projecting a decrease in fare revenues of and I was wondering, what was the why are we expecting lower fare revenues? Are we expecting a decrease in ridership over the next year?
So fare revenues are a little softer because of ridership. We haven't published the projection for ridership, but there is a softness there. I feel like there was another factor. I'm checking my notes. Because I don't. Yeah, I don't see in my notes if there was anything else significant. Andy, am I missing anything? You're here, so.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've talked to Forrest about it. I think nationally, we're seeing ridership dropping a little bit, around 2% nationally. And then we have some issues here within our service area, like detours, like construction, which also kind of decentivize ridership in the way that we kind of saw it super strong in FY25.
Thank you.
Single, I probably talked to some of you. As you know, university is building a lot of student dorms. So right now, students scattered, all over the place. They take our buses to school. But coming in August, with their 2,600 beds, there's going to be closed campus medicine division. Some are close to that block. So university providing a really good service from that location. They're building that as a center there, connect to central campus and the north campus. They have a direct connection. So we expect there's gonna be some loss to ridership. And then you put student commuter trips, right? But we try to make some adjustment, maybe do some marketing, encourage the student to take transit for other purposes. But again, the projection reflects some of those land use change, I would say.
Does it also take into account things like university adding a new hospital? The whole con center is, several hundreds, if not thousands of jobs. Did you take that into account, even as you look at the student change?
We don't do all details projection, but we look at the bigger picture, look at the trend. For example, this year we see ridership drop by roughly 3%. And look at the national average in student enrollment. So that's kind of our estimate for the overall ridership.
Thanks for trying to inform us. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Gina, for listening to the presentation. We can wrap this up. Matt, do you want to call anything out?
Let's go.
Is there something that put you to sleep? You want to bring our attention to Matt on CEO report?
Only that continue to work to bring you the draft scope of the fair study. Working at bringing you your education items tonight was one part of the things you'd asked for. That was another part. So it is still going on in the background. Thank you for your patience.
And I just ask one question about the CEO report. I learned that the building may actually start construction on the old one live in July. Is that what I'm getting correctly?
Yeah, that's their scheduled timeline.
So the question I have is, we moved our buses because of Fourth Avenue and they were gonna return at the end of the year. If there is actual building construction, do you still anticipate that our buses will be at where they were on Fourth and Fifth, or will they remain where they are currently beyond the end of the year estimate?
Once the construction on Fourth Avenue is done, we're moving back. But unfortunately, we're not gonna get all the space we used to have. So we have to find some curb space nearby, like a Liberty, to park 2 buses.
So it's only two.
Yeah.
The new building will not affect that.
No, I mean, it only affects 2 buses.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, just to this question, so when is the time, like, is it 1 year or the whole 2
Oh,
years of
it's gonna be
construction?
like 2-3 years construction.
So you won't have access to Blake.
There's 2 separate projects.
Okay,
Sorry, the Fourth Avenue project is what we're dealing with now.
right.
We expect that to be wrapped up this summer.
Hopefully by
And
December.
get, when the streets back in, Fourth Avenue will be better. We will bring our buses primarily back off Washington, although a couple might still have to park in front of the federal building or something. Then the construction of the building on the Y lot is they need, what they're doing under Fourth Avenue is like the underground utilities to service that building. So one has to proceed the other. I believe, Forrest, if I'm correct, the construction of the building is not really gonna hamper our operations.
You're right.
Except that we can't park adjacent to it on Fourth and Fifth like we used to.
Right.
We gotta move those buses either to the other side of Fourth, around the corner on Leopard.
That's correct. When we do our like additional bus lane construction, which scheduled roughly 2020, 2029, we don't know yet. And then that will have a bigger impact on bus operations. But we try to minimize that. Hopefully, we don't have to move again the entire bus operations. Well, we'll have to deal with that when we get there.
And with that, just the D2A2 bus and the air ride, will they move back with us? Back to the.
There's not gonna be curb space on Fifth anymore. And permanently, there's no more curb space with D2A2 on Fifth. So when we do construction, they may have to relocate somewhere else. If we complete construction, we may have space for them. But we'll have to.
So,
review it.
for instance, on the other side of Fourth Avenue,
That was the plan.
that is that the plan?
Right, I mean, when all of the entire construction is complete. We may have that space hold on. But we'll have to rearrange things.
Yeah, I don't wanna lose the momentum. And so, yeah, if we isolate them up, say near campus and then all the other bus operations. We're just seeing such good growth with D2A2, for instance, I need to reach that momentum.
We just basically have not enough space during the construction. There's just no space for even for our bus.
Well, is there space in front of the library on the side, and there's like that side lot that,
The library lane,
yeah, it's but now that building is almost done construction,
yeah,
that's behind the
we
library.
did explore that, it might be option. But for boarding, some work needs to be done there.
For the A2B2 bus, exhausting.
They used park there before, there's something we need to talk to DDA. They're open to that.
I do know a lot of people, like to your point. That when I've taken the bus, they take another bus to get, from wherever they live to Blake, and then they would jump onto the flyer or to the A2B.
Ideally, we want to keep all buses different.
Any other questions?
And the wildlife is progressing. I think it was going to be.
It's end of July,
Ways off.
probably like 3 construction season.
But it is still progressing.
Yeah,
Hear a lot about what's going on with.
right now it's scheduled for end of July.
Still a going concern. I think some of us have concerns about federal money that might be involved in it, or tax credits that could somehow be removed, and could that just sort of yank the rug out from under? I think we've seen that can happen. We have received no information that suggests that it's likely to happen here. So we proceed with our partners, the Housing Commission and the city. We have very little control, unfortunately, over some of these things, and so we sort of end up with leftover curb space where we can find it, and we appreciate our partners being as generous as they are.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for that, everyone. Action item recap, Jeff?
Just a couple things tonight. I have a note that we are again next month going to be discussing the LTF committee or task force. So that'll be on the August agenda. I have a note, Kathleen, that you'll be contacting Sue Radwan on education for public interfacing with the policy governance framework. Finance staff was asked if they could put together any examples of, I believe it's village adjustment. Okay. And then, it was asked if governance committee might, review and discuss agenda orderings.
Okay, sounds good. We're gonna move on to topics for next meeting. We'll have the final draft budget presentation, as well as the public hearing for that budget. Fiscal year 26 quarterly 3 financial report and a policy manual mock-up with various time. Not sure how we're gonna move forward on that one. Is there anyone, for public comment?
We do not have anyone online.
And there's no one behind you. No, for public comment. Okay, great. I'll entertain a motion. That's my daughter. We will now take a motion for adjournment.
Oh.
So moved by Rich, yeah, seconded by Tony, all those in favor? Thank you so much, everyone, have a great night.
Okay.
Go.